privilege for me to be here at Watkins Books, because the history behind Watkins Books is immense, and to be sort of part of that is something that's very, very special. Most of the time, every Sunday, I'm sat here doing readings, astrology readings, and I also do tarot readings. What happens is that I get a lot of Harry Potter devotees that sort of pass, parents with children, that pass me and look into the window with astonishment, and they'll go, "Oh my God, there's a real wizard!" Or they go, "Daddy, why is that man working on his laptop in the window?" So those are the sort of things I get. But for me, the real kind of special thing is that the idea for the astrological dynamics of the universe and kind of what brought it out came from here, from this particular point. And one day while I was doing readings, Aitan came up to me and he said, "Oh, I've got this magazine that I'm doing," and I said, "Oh, I'd be interested in kind of doing a horoscope kind of column." And he went, okay. And we were to-ing and fro-ing about ideas, and we came up with this kind of concept of looking at sort of cycles, particularly sort of political, you know, what was happening in the world and how it was related to maybe countries or cycles that were going on. And this sort of harked back to kind of what's known as sort of mundane astrology, which is sort of political astrology. It was really kind of much more popular in the kind of Middle Ages. What I found is that was extremely sort of fascinating for me, to be looking instead of the standard horoscopes that you see. Oh, you're a Cancerian, this month you're going to have this, or you're a Gemini, and oh, better watch out, you know, you might slip over the banana. It was looking at cycles and aspects and the relationships between planets and the zodiac signs. And so what came out of that was this idea for me that kind of was brimming in me, and I thought, oh, this is a good idea, I like this, and I started to write for it. And I really enjoy writing the column, you know, because you know, you can cover a whole host of different subject matters that, you know, politically, on an economic scale, culturally as well. And a couple of months later, Aitan comes in to have a chat with me again, and just to catch up with me. And in that conversation, I said, "Oh, I've got this idea for a book." He goes, "Okay. What's the idea?" And I tell him the idea. He goes, "Great. Can you write it in 3 months?" And I said, "You know, and you know, I mean, I like a challenge, but 3 months." And Aitan has this brilliant way of just bringing this enthusiasm, you know. And I thought, yeah, of course. I mean, Aitan's a Libran, but I'm sure he's got some Aries strongly in his sort of chart, because he's got this pioneering sort of spirit about him. I thought, yes, if he believed in me, I can do it. And so I did. And it took me 3 months to write, and in July 2011, it was finished. Really from the great support of my wife Mandy, because without her it wouldn't have happened, and patience and living with the artistic temperament that I probably was at that time. And so then the book was sort of finished, and you know, for me, just from the column to the book, it kind of made sense. So okay, so what's the book about? That's the kind of next question. Now, at the time when I was writing this, I was extremely inspired by an astrologer, a natal astrologer. I call him an American astrologer, but he's actually French, called Dane Rudhow. And his book called The Pulse of Life, which I think was sort of first published in the early 70s, looked at the structure of the zodiac through the seasons. Now, if there's any sort of budding astrologers out there, my book is Western Astrology, Tropical Astrology, and that's really kind of based on the starting point being the spring equinox. That's been the first point with Aries, and sort of continuation of that. And the concept of the seasons fascinated me, and how individual signs relate to each other in terms of a relationship with the Earth and its natural cycles. And this led me to look at the relationships between the signs of the zodiac, in particular the outer planets of Uranus, Neptune and Pluto. Now I must add this again, that with those outer planets of Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, I see them very much as an external kind of force. Okay, many astrologers, particularly modern astrology, look at them as internal, meaning that they have a reflection, or that they are rulerships of the signs Uranus, of course, of Aquarius, Neptune, Pisces, and Pluto, Scorpio. I take a kind of wider view of that and think that, that it's much more external, of influences that have happened. Now, the regular column in the Mind, Body, Spirit magazine is all about predictions mainly, and looking at planetary aspects in the charts of the USA. Again, for all you astrologers out there, I've taken the 1776 chart and the UK, the 1801 chart. And people might say, why have you taken those charts? And because those are the charts that work for me, quite simply. So what I needed to do is, if I was going to make predictions, I was going to have to look at the past. Okay, so this book is from 1970 and it goes all the way up to 2020. So I could only take a small chunk, of course, because you know, I couldn't go do a sort of a history lesson. I mean, you know, the book would be a lot bigger than it is. So I picked 1970 for a couple of reasons. The first main reason as a starting point is because doing a bit of research on this, I found that an awful lot of people found that the political and cultural changes that that happened in the 60s, for a lot of people happened more in the 70s. And this is a marked time when the planet Uranus went into the zodiac sign of Libra. That went in 1969, but 70 it was transiting and comfortably in there. And this goes back to the seasons of what you could say is the autumn equinox, because at the moment we have Uranus on the opposite sign of Libra, which is Aries. So there's a relationship going on here that I think from 1970 is to what we're going through now. It's a different kind of relationship. And what I mean by that is that what we are experiencing now, you know, on this planet is quite a momentous change. Some of it's not positive, a lot of it's in fact quite negative at the moment, and it's quite drastic and it feels quite revolutionary. And I'm not just talking about this country, I'm talking about other countries, particularly Europe, if you look at the moment and what's happening there. And people are reacting against governmental institutions here. And if you look at the symbol of Aries, Aries is a sign that's very youthful. It's at the start of the zodiac. It's very impulsive, and its traditional ruler is Mars, and therefore it's going to make an impact. It does not want to make love and peace. Okay? When we had Uranus and Libra, Libra is a sign of partnerships. It is also ruled by Venus. Venus being the quality of the peacemaker as well, and also rules the arts. So at that particular time we saw lots of changes within the artistic scene. And in the book I look into this relationship with the past, because it's important for finding out what's going to happen over the next 8 years up until 2020. You know, because the way I see it, at the moment we are at a particular crisis point. We are at a sensitive point. here. And I'm not just talking about the square aspect between you know, Uranus and Pluto that most astrologers are going on about at the moment, which is important. There are other aspects, particularly Neptune has just gone into the star sign of Pisces, where it remained for the next 13.5 years. This is important. If you think about the last time that Neptune was in Pisces, it was 1848, and you had one of the biggest movements happen in Hinesfield in America. Recently Neptune has gone to Pisces, so I expect to see a similar ideas coming out into the consciousness. So these are the kind of things that I'm exploring in the book, but not just from a kind of worldview, from an individual view as well. This book is what I would say a survival guide for a lot of you. How you can get the best out of the next 8 years. How you, as just a sun sign, can make use of what's going on. How you fit in with the world and the rhythms that's around us at the moment. So I think that really the astrological dynamics of the universe is looking at moments in history to pinpoint very sensitive areas where our consciousness has been raised. It's really kind of important. I'll give you an example I give in the book, but on the 13th of July 1985, does anyone know what happened? No, didn't register me. Live Aid. Okay? Live Aid was an event that I remember, and a lot of people do. And at the time, just look at the outer planets, and I'm going to include Jupiter and Saturn in this as well. Okay, so on the 13th of July 1985, we had Jupiter in Aquarius, Saturn in Scorpio, Uranus in Sagittarius, Neptune in Capricorn, and Pluto in Scorpio. Now, the term that was used at the time, which I think is a fantastic term for Uranus in Sagittarius, was it was seen as the global jukebox. Okay? If you look at Sagittarius, it is the sign that rules overseas, and the archer who fires his arrows in many directions. And also we had the high intensity of Scorpio and Pluto, which revealed to the world the horror of the Ethiopian people suffering and experiencing death at that particular time, which is very Pluto. And a need for Western money, Capricorn, to help their plight, Neptune, through pop music. And I put this under the Jupiter and Aquarius is very much about sort of pop music and innovative musical expressions here as well. And that's just one example of a moment where a collection of people and events through the planetary aspects and the zodiac signs have sort of ignited the consciousness of this Earth. The thing about the Neptune in Pisces is that you immediately think, well, it's in its rulership, so it should be quite happy. Yeah. And I think that there is an essence of that, but there is a need for escapism as well. The Pluto factor is having an effect. I mean, when Pluto went into Capricorn in I think it was January 2008, a couple of weeks later we saw the first murmurs of the financial crisis. It's having a big effect. Yes.
So, following on from that, how long do you think it's going to last?
Well, you'll have to read the book. No, I think what I've done in the book, actually, I've looked at two charts, which is the UK chart and the USA chart. There's a chapter each looking at the charts and then following on from that, making predictions. And I wouldn't expect to see an economic recovery until 2015, or the first start of it, really. Yeah. Yes.
So the world's not going to end on the 21st of December?
Well, yeah, the Mayan calendar No, no, it's not. But I think it's because what I say in the first, you know, in my introduction into the book is, look, you know, there's been an awful lot of anxiety over 2012. You know, have we as humans created this kind of massive sort of ball of energy that's going, oh my God, what's happening to the world? It's an interesting concept, you know, because each one of us has an energy that gets transmitted out and creates another energy. I'm a very big believer in energy creates energy. And so for a lot of people out there, 2012, leading up to it, I mean, how long that you've been hearing about 2012, the anxiety. And I think that's why, for a lot of people I've spoken to, you know, 2012 has not been the best one. It's been a tough time. And yes, the planets are helping us to learn, but I think we've put a certain amount of anxiety on it ourselves as well. I think there is, you know, and that, as you said, you know, about the Mayan calendar and 21st of December. It's interesting because I think that, if anything, that astrologically, from a Western astrological basis, I think that there was more happening on the 21st of December in 2010 than this, you know, this 21st of December. I think there was, you know, a lot more going on. And I think we're in it, whatever people are saying, we're in it, this is it. And it's not so much that, and if you just switch on the news, you know, at the moment there is an awful lot happening, and we live in interesting times, I think is the expression.
So do you think it's just people's perception of the world not continuing as we know it, so therefore other people's perceptions of political structures and things like that are changing, so it's got to come to an end? Because there's an awful lot of scaremongering, even by some of our colleagues who are, you know, to all intents and purposes very well respected psychics on many levels, but are taking very extreme predictions. And I'm just thinking, if they just picked up on an emotional response where people are going, that's it, I can't carry on, it's all changing, but in fact the world's still there, but they've got to change their outlook. Is that what you think might be the case?
I think that as humans we've got this thing of wanting to know what an end is, or where the end is. We, on a psychological level, I think that we kind of need to know if there is an end. You know, it's a kind of big eternal question. So, you know, 2012, you know, many years ago might have seemed like a kind of a good sort of number almost, you know. I mean, I can only speak from an astrologer's sort of point of view, and although 2012 is difficult, there's no doubt about that, I think so was 2011, you know. But there's positive things that have come out of this, and let's not forget this. You know, what I found really fascinating was we had this Uranus square with Pluto, particularly over the summer, and if you look at the UK chart, 1801 chart, this was at 7 degrees, where Libra is the ascendant of the UK chart at, you know, 7 degrees, and a descendant is Aries at 7 degrees. So it had this square aspect when the Olympics was going on here, and that's the manifestation of the positive. And then some people that say, well, was the Olympics that positive? There will always be that, but generally it was a raise of consciousness for us all. And so there can be positive things that can come out of that. Even with adverse aspects, you can get that. You know, it's the way you respond to those energies that's the most important thing. And don't go into this kind of thing of, well, it's what I've termed a psychic shudder, meaning a experience that has slightly made them go on a slightly different frequency. And for some people it's not easy to get back to the frequency they once were. So this book is learning to be able to do that, learning to know when that psychic shudder happened. And also it deals with our ancestors as well, making a real connection with what we would term as past lives. Because I think that myself here, might be slightly controversial, that many people who experience past lives, it might not be past lives, but it might be ancestral lives that's happened previously, and that the memory has transferred to a person, even skip generations, anxieties, fears, phobias and stuff like that. So yeah, that's the second book.
How long have you got?
We're near the beginning. I'm not doing it in 3 months.
2 months.
Not that, no, I'm taking my time over this one. No, I hope to complete it by May time of next year. I would expect it to be completed by then.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about well, you didn't say it specifically, but the vibes of counterculture, and they can go. It could be either, let's say, punk or hippie.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that there's a lot of angst. You also explained a bit what you think is going to happen in the next few years. How do you think the whole punk and hippie thing is going to play out in the next few decades, I guess? Yeah.
Yeah, really, very good. Really good question actually. I mean, what I've used in the book is archetypes. There's certain, like a great archetype, particularly for the '70s, is David Bowie. You know, even if he didn't know it, he was a Capricorn. There's a couple of charts for David Bowie actually. One gives him a Libra rising, one gives him Aquarius rising, so it's a bit kind of up in the air. I think the Aquarius rising myself. But anyway, he became an archetype for a particular movement, and countercultures, I think, were very defined back then. You know, you were either a punk, or you were, you know, into prog rock, or you were a mod or a rocker. I think now it's less defined, and if you look at the outer planets particularly, I've been looking at kind of Neptune in Pisces for countercultures, and you know, going back to 1848 actually, you know, one of the other movements that mainly happened was the pre-Raphaelites, and they led on to the aesthetic movement. So I would, and I think I do say this in the book, I would expect a kind of a bygone movement to happen, and quite a romantic movement as well, for a younger generation. Not until the sort of, I'd say about 2016, 2017, when Neptune is you know, comfortable in Pisces really, because when it's at the early degrees, it's still trying to find itself. But I don't know. The other another thing that is interesting actually here is the Uranus in Aries, and the movement there, because I think this is, and we're still again at the early days of that. I think that you're going to the big kind of revolution is to do with the gender of male, you know, masculinity, and how that's going to be affected. If you look at the opposite sign, Libra, where Uranus was in the early 70s, we had a big, on the feminist movement particularly, was strong, and so the opposite sign, which is a very masculine, archetypal sign, Aries, I think you will have the masculinity will be challenged, and something will come out of that that will make a difference.